Good morning guys and welcome to another reading vlog. Today is Tuesday and I'm super excited because I'm starting a book that I've been wanting to read for quite a while now, but it's kind of a bigger book, and obviously, as you'll probably be able to tell from the title of this video, I'm going to be reading Little Women by Louisa May Alcott, and honestly I'm so excited to read this book. I bought this copy of it, which, let's be honest, is probably one of the most beautiful covers ever to exist because it's just gorgeous. But I bought this copy a few months ago now because I was intending to try and read it before the new film adaptation came out, but that just didn't end up happening. So I went to go see the new film adaptation, absolutely fell in love with it, and then have just been ever so excited to read this book ever since. So I'm now finally at a point where I don't have any other reading obligations other than this book, so I'm going to make a start today and I'm super excited to get into the story. And I also thought I'd put a kind of like fun twist on this reading vlog because, as well as reading this one, once I've finished reading the classic Little Women, I also thought I would read a modern retelling just to compare and see how the story changes. I just thought that would be a fun little thing to do as well. But for now, I actually need to make a start on this book, but I'm heading off to work this morning, so I'll be picking this one up for the first time on my lunch break. So I'm excited, aren't we, Ruby?
Close your eyes, get some rest. I'm by your side, lay your head on my chest. I know you've had a really bad day.
So it's now Thursday and I realise I haven't really been keeping you updated with my progress on Little Women, and that is actually because my progress has been kind of non-existent. Not because I haven't wanted to read it, but just because I started it on Tuesday as I said I was going to, but then Tuesday evening, Wednesday during the day and Wednesday evening were kind of hectic, so I haven't had all that much time for reading. So I am currently only about 70 pages into this book, and the book in total is about 700 pages long, so I'm only about 1/10 of the way through. But although I haven't made too much progress with the book so far, what I can say is that the bit that I have read I'm really enjoying, because it's kind of just introducing you to the four sisters at this point, and it's just really fun to get that kind of like more in-depth overview than you get in the film, because the film, although I absolutely loved it, kind of just jumps straight into a dual timeline style like story, so you're kind of going from like the past and the present, and you don't necessarily get that sort of slower introduction to the characters, whereas in the book I'm presuming it's just going to follow a much more linear narrative style, so we're kind of just going to follow the sisters along their journeys, and I'm really enjoying that so far. Now I'm hoping that today won't be quite as busy at work, so I should get time to do some more reading on my lunch break. But I have to say, the one thing that people say about this book is that you are not going to like book Amy. I loved movie Amy because Florence Pugh was just incredible, but everyone says that book Amy is awful. But so far, granted I'm not very far into the book, I have to say that she's definitely not come across as my least favourite sister. So far the sister that I'm liking the least is Meg, because I feel like she's the one that's coming across as the most like snobby, and the one that's like so unhappy with being poor and just is like very self-pitying, and I'm sure that might change as the book goes on, and I'm sure that everyone isn't just making it up that book Amy is awful, but at this point in the story anyway, Meg is definitely coming across as my least favourite one. But I'm looking forward to carrying on later and hopefully getting more into it and making some more progress.
But I'm right here, it's gonna be okay. The world could fall down, it's gonna be okay. The sun could go out, we're gonna be okay. If all the blue skies fade to grey, we're gonna be okay. Calm your soul, hold my hand, don't let go. I understand. I know it hurts, it wasn't fair. It's over now, so don't despair. The world could fall down, it's gonna be okay. The sun could go out, we're gonna be okay. If all the blue skies fade
So it is now Saturday, and honestly I'm so happy about that. I mean, to be fair, I'm always happy when it's the weekend, but this week I'm extremely happy because I really want to get started on reading Little Women properly. I'm only 130 pages in, but this week at work, the week was just super hectic and there were lots of things going on, so I didn't really manage to use many of my lunch breaks to actually get much reading done. So I'm currently only 130 pages into this book, which means I haven't made very much progress at all. However, I am really excited to get into it this weekend. We don't have a lot of plans this weekend, so I'm hoping that I'll be able to spend quite a bit of time reading. And also, kind of funnily enough, there is a storm coming this weekend which is called Storm Ciara, and like, I can't believe that the first time something has actually got my name and the first time my name really gets mentioned anywhere spelt like my name is spelt is actually when there is a storm. So don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but that does mean that the weather this weekend is probably not going to be brilliant, which does bode well for getting lots of reading done because I probably won't want to spend very much time outside. So thank you to Storm Ciara, I might actually get some good reading done this weekend. But today we're actually going out to a new ice skating rink. There's one that just opened up a couple of weeks ago in Leeds, and so we're going to head out to there. It's kind of funny because the chapter that I've literally just read was the one where Amy, Jo and Laurie go skating, and I'm just hoping, it's been quite a while since I've last gone ice skating, but as long as it doesn't go quite as badly as it does for Amy, I should be okay. So I'll catch up with you when I get home from ice skating, let you know how it went, and also probably do some reading.
Fall down, it's gonna be okay. The sun could go out, we're gonna be okay. If all the blue skies fade to gray, we're gonna be okay. The world could fall down, it's gonna be okay. The sun could go out.
So we're back from ice skating, which was actually really fun. I haven't been ice skating, like I said, for so many years. I used to go all the time when I was younger, but I haven't done it for so long, but it was actually really good, and I actually didn't do too badly. I was definitely not a pro or anything like that, but I didn't fall over, which was definitely a win in my opinion. But now that we're back and we've had some lunch, I'm just chilling out because it's starting to get a little bit chilly. Today isn't like a stormy day. The storm's not meant to come in until tomorrow, but it is definitely getting a little bit chillier, and we're just going to sit inside and basically get cozy for the rest of the afternoon. So I'm hoping to, like, I'm definitely not going to finish this today. I'm not going to suggest that because that's just ridiculous, but I would like to maybe get halfway through, so I'd need to read another couple of hundred of pages by the end of today, which I don't think is too ridiculous. So I'm just going to sit here on the couch and get cozy and hopefully do quite a bit of reading. Morning guys, so I'm not sure if you'll be able to hear the wind and the rain in the background, but it's safe to say that Storm Ciara has definitely arrived. It's honestly so windy and rainy today, but I kind of love it. I really feel like I prefer days like this that are like super stormy to ones that are just kind of in the middle, because I feel like the weather just needs to decide whether it's going to be nice or not, because I just can't really deal with that kind of middle one where it's not nice enough to stay in, like, to go outside, but it's also not gross enough that you can really get away with staying inside all day. So I kind of really like these stormy days. But I'm actually heading out, which is, you know, going to be an interesting experience because of how rainy it is. And first of all, going into York to meet Em. We're just going to have some lunch and do a little bit of like cafe hopping, I think. And then I'm also going out for coffee later on with my stepdad and my sister. But I'm going to get the train into York, which means I should have a good bit of time to do some reading of Little Women. I'm currently about 300 pages in, and it's kind of getting to a bit that's like a little bit getting a bit more serious. So I don't want to give any spoilers away, but it's one of the like major events of the story is kind of like kicking off. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens. And yeah, I'm going to pick this up on the train and I'll catch up with you later on once I'm home from York. Waiting for the train and it's just a little bit windy. I'm back in my pyjamas and back from York. Honestly, I got so wet. I'm honestly so excited to just be back in warm clothes because the rain hit us as soon as I got to York. Well, Em had walked to come and meet me at the station and she was already soaking wet, and then we got splashed by a car going past, and basically it was just a hot mess because there was just so much rain. Ended up clearing up towards the end of the day, but by that point we were already like completely soaked, and once you're like that soaking wet, you're just probably never going to get dry again, or at least that's how it felt. But we did go into a couple of really nice cafes, and we went to Betty's, which is like basically a staple of York, and normally there's a huge queue outside so you can hardly ever get in, or you'd have to wait for a while. But this time, because of the weather, it was really quiet, so we got straight in, which was lovely. And then we also went to another cafe, which I can't remember the name of, I'll have to ask but it was lovely, and I got a vegan sausage sandwich, which was delicious. So all in all, it was a pretty great day, and I've also just been out for coffee with my stepdad and my sister as well, so I'm all coffeeed out pretty much. But I did manage to get quite a lot of reading done on the train, and I'm now, I think, a little over halfway into this book finally. I'm just over 400 pages in, and it just keeps getting better. I honestly love this story because it's just so wholesome. I feel like it's kind of like, obviously got some feminist vibes going in, but it's definitely like a classic 1800s moral story. Like there's definitely a lot of like morality and just like virtue strewn into the story as well, but it's just really wholesome and lovely. I've just made it to part 2. I think the book is split into 2 parts. So the first part is definitely more focused on childhood, so you've got these 4 sisters who are ranging from, I think, like age 12 to 16 at the beginning of the book, which in like today's terms seems quite old. Like you wouldn't think of them as being children, but in the book they're referred to quite a lot as like little girls, especially the 2 younger ones that are 12 and 13, and I feel like in that time childhood seemed to maybe last a little bit longer. So the first bit is definitely more like childhood focused, and then in part 2 there's like a gap between the 2 parts of a few years, and it's kind of like a bit of a transformative gap, and then by the time you reach them in part 2 it's definitely more focused on the transition into adulthood. So I'm really excited to see how that is going, and yeah, I'm really enjoying it. I'm now just about to make some dinner. I'm going to try and make a vegan risotto, which is something I've never tried to do before. I've never eaten a vegan risotto made by anyone else, and I haven't made risotto since going vegan, so it's been like a good 4 years since I've last had a risotto. So I'm going to give that a try, and hopefully it will be delicious, but that should take a little while and I'll probably have to leave it simmering, so I'm going to get some more reading done whilst I cook. Wednesday, which means it's been just over a week since I started reading Little Women, and I am going to finish this book this evening. I'm under 100 pages to the end now, and honestly love this book so much. 2 points: I just read one of the most like emotional chapters for the whole book on my lunch break at work, and as you'll be able to see from the clip that I inserted before, it was a whole experience, honestly. Was it a good idea to read that chapter at work? Maybe not, because I almost cried, but it was a very good chapter, and yeah, I just love the book, and obviously that is one of the key moments. Don't want to say specifically, but all I will say is that I felt like Joey from Friends when I got to that bit, because it was just, yeah, a whole experience is all I can say.
Beth is really, really sick. Joe's there, but I don't think there's anything she could do.
And then the other point I'd like to make is that I really don't get why people don't like Amy. I know I said this at the beginning of the book, but I was prepared for that opinion to maybe change. But I really don't understand what the big deal is. Like, she is a little bit snobby, but overall I don't think she is a bad character or anything like that, and I feel like she's just the member of the family that tries to do what she thinks is right and sort of to follow a lifestyle that she thinks is proper and everything, but that's just kind of the way way that she has been led, and she also feels like she has like a financial responsibility for the family as well. So I really don't think that there's anything terrible about her, and personally she's actually my favourite sister. I feel like her and Jo are very, very similar characters in the sense that they're both quite like stubborn and strong-willed, but I feel like people love that in Jo but they don't seem to like it in Amy, which I don't really understand. But yeah, definitely going to be finishing the book this evening, but first I need to probably get in the shower and maybe have some dinner, and then I'll get straight to reading. Wow, this is not very attractive lighting. I look so tired, but I did manage to just finish up reading Little Women, and oh my god, was this just such an amazing book. I had a feeling I was going to love it because of how much I enjoyed the film, but the book just ended up being, I won't say better because I did enjoy both versions of it in their own way. I think they were both brilliant, but the book was amazing just because I feel like in the film there is a lot that has to be cut out because, you know, time restraints and everything, whereas in the book you really got to delve into everything. So yeah, really loved it, and it definitely lived up to my hopes from watching the film. And yeah, it was just such a lovely reading experience. I think this book was just so wholesome, and it's very character driven. It's certainly not a very like fast-paced or plot focused book. It really does just focus in on this like relatively small cast of characters and just follow their development and sort of track how their lives develop and change and intertwine with one another, which is something that I really enjoy. It might not be for everyone because it is quite slow paced, but it's something that I personally really loved. And there was kind of a quote that I really enjoyed that was from quite close to the end, which I just thought was kind of summarised what I just said basically. So it's on page, in my copy, 688, and it says, "But you see, Jo wasn't a heroine. She was only a struggling human girl like hundreds of others, and she just acted out her nature." And I just feel like that kind of really summarises what I just said about how it's so much more character driven rather than plot focused, because there is no sort of like major climax like you'd expect from a book which was more heroine focused, and instead it kind of just really delves into like human nature and how people sort of gradually try and better themselves over the years. And yeah, this was just a really, really lovely reading experience. So I'm super glad that I finally tackled this book, because I was kind of put off by how big it was, because I haven't really read many classics recently, which I've been wanting to change, but I was kind of a little bit nervous to delve straight back into a bigger one, but ended up being the perfect one to start with for 2020 because it was just such a lovely reading experience. I'm now going to continue on with the Little Women theme though, as I think I mentioned at the beginning of the video, because I also have this modern adaptation, like a retelling of the book Meg Jo by Virginia Cantra. I've borrowed this one from Em, and she read it and said that she gave it 3 stars, so I'm not really sure what to expect, but I thought that it would be really fun to compare the classic with a retelling. So I'm not going to be starting this right now because it's the evening and I need to get to bed because I'll be up early for yoga and then work in the morning, but I'll be picking this one up on my lunch break tomorrow and I'll let you know my thoughts. So it's Thursday evening and I feel like these dark circles under my eyes are really highlighting how ready I am for the weekend, but I did actually manage to make a start on Meg Jo on my lunch break today, although to be honest, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, it is not gripping me as much as I'd hoped. I feel like I love Little Women so much, whereas this book, I don't know, I'm just not necessarily vibing with it so well so far. It just feels like by making it modern, it's kind of losing a lot of the charm and just like the sort of warmth and wholesomeness that you get from the classic, whereas I'm not really getting that as much for this one. Now I don't want to judge the book too quickly because I did only manage to read 45 pages on my lunch break, so I'm not very far in at all, so I'm definitely not sort of giving up on it yet, but I have to say it's definitely not pulling me in as much as Little Women, which I loved for like right from the very first page. And another thing that's interesting about this one is that I feel like I'm enjoying Meg's perspective the most. So in this one it's a retelling, but we're getting like altering chapters from Meg's perspective and then Jo's perspective, and Meg's one is actually the one that I'm enjoying more so far. I don't know why that's surprising to me, but I feel like she was the sister that I feel like you got maybe like the least insight into in the like original book. She's kind of like not necessarily a side character, but she's just not as prevalent as some of the other sisters, particularly Amy and Jo, who are much more sort of like bold characters, I guess. So Meg's perspective in this one is actually pulling me in a lot more, so I'm interested to see how that sort of continues on throughout the book. But now that I'm home and it's the evening, I don't have many plans this evening. In fact, I have absolutely no plans whatsoever, so I'm just going to settle down and read some of this book, and hopefully I'll start to enjoy it a little bit more. Oh, one more thing I don't like about it, which is kind of another thing that's just like taking away from the charm of it, is that they've tried to modernise some of the characters' names, and the one that they've done that I really hate is Laurie. So obviously he is Laurie, but his name is Theodore, and then Jo calls him Teddy in the original book, and in this one they've shortened Theodore down to Trey, and I hate that so much. So yeah, those are my thoughts so far, but I'll let you know if anything else pops up. And just like that, we're back to another very rainy, stormy Saturday, because this week just seems to have flown by. But I'm now about 250 pages through Meg and Jo, and I'm not gonna lie, the book doesn't seem to be getting much more interesting for me. It just doesn't feel very Little Women-y. I know it's a retelling, which obviously means that it changes the story somewhat or modernises it, but I don't really feel like, other than the characters sharing some of the same names and like relationships and things like that, it really doesn't feel like a connected story whatsoever. It feels like all of the characters have changed, and not for the better in my opinion. I feel like in Little Women I liked all of the characters because it was just so like wholesome and just like lovely, but in this story I'm finding that rather than liking all of the characters, I find that they're all kind of unsufferable and just like really not very compelling. So that's kind of a problem, because it's just making the book not a particularly enjoyable reading experience. It's not a difficult read for me, like it is pretty easy to get through, and it's not terrible necessarily, but I'm just not finding it anywhere near as kind of like sort of, well, compelling as Little Women was. And I think probably the fact that I'm reading it directly after is highlighting how different it is and how much less I like the characters in this format. But I've got only about 120 pages left to go, so I'll probably be able to finish it today, and who knows, it might change my opinion by the end, but so far I'm not really seeing it. Well, I finally finished up reading Meg and Jo, and I have some definite mixed thoughts on this book, because it wasn't an entirely terrible reading experience, but I think comparing it to Little Women, it just felt like a bit of a disappointment to me for a few reasons. And I think the main one really is that in this book you get a prologue, which is basically like the first chapter of Little Women, which is basically like a Christmas scene where the girls kind of are introduced, and that's kind of basically the exact same in this book, only it's obviously a modern version. But in Little Women you then sort of carry on into their like childhood bit, and like I mentioned earlier on in this video, you get like a whole first volume all about their childhood section, and the second volume is much more focused on the sort of journey into adulthood, whereas in this book you get the childhood prologue and then you move straight into many years later into adulthood, where Jo is like 28 years old, and then I think Meg must be like 29 or 30. So I feel like you miss out so much of what makes Little Women so compelling, because for me what made Little Women so sort of like compelling right the way through was that you get to follow these characters across a massive span of their lives, and you get to see their development and the things that happen to them to make them into the adults that they eventually become, whereas in this book you skip all of that and you just jump straight into adulthood. So I feel like you don't have the connection with the characters in the same way that you do in Little Women. So that was kind of like the main thing that made me disappointed by this book. And the other thing I wasn't so keen on was just that I feel like in a lot of the characters, they weren't really very similar to their characters in Little Women at all. Like the personality traits were quite different, and particularly actually with the parents, which I thought was kind of strange because it kind of changed the way that they sort of interacted with the children. But yeah, it just felt like aside from having the same names, a lot of the characters were quite different from their original sort of inspirations. So that was the disappointing side of it. However, there were some interesting bits, and in particular I did actually quite end up enjoying the romance side of Jo's story, because that was actually kind of the main focus of her chapters throughout this book, and that was actually really fun. But overall, I think just compared to Little Women, I didn't love this as a retelling, and I think this would have probably been better because it wasn't that similar to Little Women at all. If it just would have been its own story rather than sort of focusing on trying to make connections to a book that it wasn't really necessarily sort of that connected with, if that makes any sense whatsoever. So I don't know whether this is like a 2 or a 3-star read, but it certainly didn't live up to the sort of amazing reading experience of Little Women, which was definitely a 5-star read. But it was definitely fun to do a read of Little Women, which was obviously amazing, and then compare it to a modern retelling. So I hope you've enjoyed hearing all of my thoughts on both Little Women and Meg Jo, and if you've read either of those books, I would love to hear your thoughts on them, because it was certainly a really fun reading experience for me. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.